One of Jay Leno's motorcycles has a rotary engine built inside the front wheel and it spins when he rides it. Even mechanics who've been building bikes for 40 years said they'd never seen anything like it. Some thought it was a hoax until Jay showed them in 2014. So how did this 100-year-old German oddity end up in his garage? Let's find out. Megola. A motorcycle with no clutch, no gears, and the engine spinning inside the front wheel. That isn't a typo, that's Megola. Built in Germany during the chaos between two world wars, this machine looked more like a science experiment than something you'd ride through Munich in 1922. But someone built it, rode it, and survived. So how did a bike this bizarre even exist? The name Megola came from three engineers, Meixner, Cockrell, and Landgraf, who wanted to challenge everything about conventional motorcycle design. They placed a 5-cylinder radial engine inside the front wheel. Each cylinder displaced 128 cc, totaling 640 cc. The whole unit rotated with the wheel, creating a gyroscopic effect so strong it stabilized the bike unnaturally. The crankshaft was fixed to the axle, the cylinders spun around it. Top speed? Around 85 kilometers per hour, but it felt faster due to vibration and zero suspension. There was no gearbox, no clutch. To stop, riders cut the ignition. To start, they pushed the bike. Only about 2,000 Megolas were built between 1921 and 1925. Today, less than 15 survive, most in museums. Jay Leno owns one, restored, and probably the only one on Earth still started by hand from the front fork. But if the Megola bent physics, the next machine broke luxury. Brough Superior SS100. Every single one was built by hand, and every owner received a guarantee. This motorcycle would hit 100 miles per hour or they'd build another. Between 1924 and 1940, that promise turned the Brough Superior SS100 into something mythical. Not just fast, but elegant. Rare, but proven. So why did it vanish from roads almost entirely? Built by George Brough in Nottingham, England, the SS100 combined an overhead valve V-twin engine from Jap or Matchless with a custom frame designed for agility and comfort. Each bike was tested personally by Brough, who famously wrote that his machines were the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles, a phrase Rolls-Royce never objected to. Only around 304 SS100s were made, each one customized, none quite alike. Lawrence of Arabia owns 7. He crashed his 8th, a 1932 model, and died. That tragedy helped push the UK government to introduce motorcycle helmets decades later. If you're still here, you're exactly the kind of viewer we make these for. Hit like, hit sub, and keep your head in the story. It's about to turn. Jay Leno owns several SS100s. One is unrestored, another fully roadworthy. But even he rarely rides them. A crash risks history. Replacement parts? Nearly non-existent. Most museums don't even start theirs anymore. Which raises the question, if Brough represented perfection, what came next that terrified engineers instead of impressing them? Vincent Black Shadow. In 1948, one motorcycle shocked the racing world with a top speed of 125 miles per hour, straight from the factory. That wasn't marketing, that was the Vincent Black Shadow. It ran a 998cc V-twin air-cooled and hand-assembled in Stevenage, England. The Speedo sat right on the tank, proudly reading 150 miles per hour, even though few riders dared to push it that far. Why? Because back then, most bikes barely touched 80. This machine blew past that on real roads with real riders. People who rode it said it felt like flying. Author Hunter S. Thompson called it a pure hallucinogen. And it looked brutal. Blacked out engine, matte frame, no chrome fuss. It didn't care about elegance, it just wanted to go. By 1955, production stopped. Only about 1,700 Black Shadows were made. Today, most of them sit quietly behind glass. Jay Leno owns 2. One's original, unrestored. The other? Tuned, tweaked, and started regularly just to hear it growl. but parts are rare. Restorers say tracking down original Vincent bolts is like hunting fossils. Most owners won't ride them in traffic. One fender tap could wipe 6 figures. And the next bike? Let's just say its engine ran smoother than the Vincent's, and it had 4 cylinders in 1931. Henderson KJ. Imagine riding a 4-cylinder motorcycle in 1931. While most bikes rattled like washing machines, the Henderson KJ purred like a Cadillac. It had a 1301cc inline-4 engine. That's right, 1300. In the early 30s, that kind of size and power was usually reserved for cars. Henderson called it the Streamline and claimed it could hit 100 miles per hour. That might have been a stretch, but still, people noticed. Police departments bought them. Chicago cops rode them because they were fast enough to catch speeding bootleggers during Prohibition. One magazine back then said the KJ felt like riding a locomotive on silk. So why don't we see them anymore? Because Henderson shut down in 1931. The Great Depression crushed the market. Excelsior, the parent company, pulled the plug without warning, even though bikes were still selling. That ended the American 4-cylinder dream overnight. Jay Leno has one tucked away in his collection, fully restored, still running. But taking it on the road? Nearly impossible. The carb is custom, tires have to be remade, and one cracked engine case could cost more than a used Tesla. But what about the next machine? The one that actually raced in the 1920s, used 2-stroke tech, and looked like it came from a steam lab. Scott Flying Squirrel. In 1926, a British motorcycle showed up at the Isle of Man TT with water cooling and a 2-stroke twin engine. That bike was the Scott Flying Squirrel. Most racers used air-cooled singles. Scott looked weird. It had radiator fins, a strange long frame, and sounded like a chainsaw on caffeine. But when it took off, people paid attention. It wasn't just fast, it was strange fast. Riders said it handled like a bicycle but roared like a truck. Alfred Scott had been building 2-strokes since 1908, but this one, it was different. The Flying Squirrel used a 596cc or 498cc water-cooled engine, and it ran clean up to 70 miles per hour. That was quick for the 1920s, especially from a 2-stroke. Jay Leno's version is fully restored, but running it takes finesse. Cooling hoses are delicate, pistons need handmade replacements, even spark plugs have to match specs no longer made. And here's the odd part. Despite its racing history, most people today barely know it existed. That's what makes it collectible. But the next bike in Leno's garage didn't just race. It was designed by a tobacco company, branded for Formula One, and built in very low numbers. Norton John Player Special. In 1974, Norton made a racing bike with a full flaring that looked more like a spaceship than a motorcycle. It was called the John Player Special. This thing was born from sponsorship, not tradition. John Player & Sons, a British tobacco brand, backed Norton's Formula 750 racing team. They wanted something that stood out, on the track and in showrooms. So Norton built it, a limited-run version of the Commando with dual headlights, bold graphics, and a body kit straight off a race bike. Underneath, it still had the same 850cc parallel twin. But the look? That was pure theater. The fiberglass fairings wrapped around the whole bike. People either loved it or thought it looked ridiculous. Only about 200 were built, and Jay Leno has one that still runs. The bodywork alone is almost impossible to replace. And the parts? Let's just say, if you crack a panel, you better know a guy with a mold. Collectors argue whether it counts as a real Norton or just a marketing experiment. Leno calls it both. It's rare, risky to ride, and somehow beautiful. Now imagine the next machine, built by a Swiss racer with British guts, and so few made they're basically ghosts. Egli-Vincent Black Shadow. In the late 1960s, a Swiss racer named Fritz Egli took a legendary British engine and built his own frame around it. That fact alone turned the Egli-Vincent into one of the rarest hybrids in motorcycle history. The base engine came from the Vincent Black Shadow, a 998cc V-twin with a reputation for raw speed and a top speed around 125 miles per hour. but Egli felt the original frame flexed too much at high speed, so he created a new one, a chrome molly spine frame that weighed less, handled tighter, and pushed the Vincent engine far beyond what it managed in the 1950s. Riders called the new setup a quiet revolution. It looked simple, but it changed everything. Most Eglis were hand-built, one at a time for racers or wealthy private buyers. Numbers vary, but experts estimate fewer than 100 true Egli-Vincent builds exist. Jay Leno owns a 1955 engine fitted into an Egli frame restored by Patrick Godet, the French builder who carried Egli's designs forward after the 1970s. Finding parts takes patience. Some pieces come from old Vincent stock, others must be machined by specialists. One mistake could sideline the bike for years. And the next story takes an even sharper turn because the machine ahead started as a 1935 prototype that BMW locked away, restored in 2005, and sparked debate over its true purpose. BMW R7. In 1934, BMW built a prototype motorcycle with Art Deco lines, hydraulic forks, and experimental electrics. That machine became known as the BMW R7. Most prototypes from that era disappeared. Some were destroyed for scrap, others stripped for parts. But the R7 stayed hidden inside BMW's storage for decades. Engineers rediscovered it in 2005 under dust with rust on the tank and broken wiring. One designer reportedly said it felt like finding a lost child. The restoration took years because many of the parts existed only on that single bike. The engine was an 800cc boxer twin, but almost every component had unique dimensions. The styling came from Hans Muth and the early BMW design teams who shaped the flat tank silhouette. They used pressed steel panels, integrated lighting, and flowing curves inspired by luxury cars of the early 1930s. Some historians argue the R7 was too expensive to build during the economic crash, so BMW moved towards simpler designs. Jay Leno's interest in the R7 makes sense. It's one of the rarest motorcycles on Earth. Some believe only one complete example exists. Starting it on camera required a full engineering crew. Now think about the next machine, created in the 1960s by Friedel Münch with a 4-cylinder NSU engine and a price tag higher than many cars of its time. Münch Mammoth. In 1966, Friedel Münch built a motorcycle using a car engine and priced it higher than a Porsche 911. That machine became the Münch Mammoth. Most people thought it was a joke. A motorcycle with an NSU 1177cc 4-cylinder car engine, drum brakes, and a fuel tank that looked like it belonged on a tractor. But it worked. Münch turned the engine to make 88 horsepower and the bike could hit over 115 miles per hour. Outrageous at the time. It weighed around 650 pounds dry, more than most bikes of the era by a long shot. Handling it took real strength. The press called it a land missile with handlebars. But the price scared buyers. In the US, it cost nearly $4,000 in the late 60s, over 3 times the cost of a Triumph or Honda. Jay Leno got his hands on one years later. Parts were a nightmare to find. Tires had to be custom cut. Even the throttle cap had to be hand-built to match the original curve. Only about 500 Mammoths were ever made. Many were lost or scrapped. The survivors, quietly sitting in collections. Now imagine the next one, released in 2012. It was fully electric, street legal, and faster than most sport bikes under 600cc. Brammo Empulse R. In 2012, a small Oregon company built one of the first electric motorcycles to look and feel like a real sport bike. That bike was the Brammo Empulse R. It came with a 10.2 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery, a 6-speed manual gearbox, and a top speed around 110 miles per hour. Unlike other electric bikes that felt like scooters, this one had gears, engine braking, and torque that kicked in instantly. Riders said it felt like a Ducati, just quiet. The bike made waves for being the first electric production motorcycle with a manual transmission. It charged in 8 hours and had a range of about 100 miles in city riding. On highways, that number dropped fast. But for early adopters, it was groundbreaking. Brammo sold fewer than 1,000 units before Polaris bought the company and folded it into Victory. After that, the Impulsive vanished from showrooms, but Jay Leno still has one. It's clean, stock, and fully functional. Today, collectors debate its place in motorcycle history. Was it a stepping stone or a detour? And here's the strange part. Some say it handled better than anything Brammo ever built, but it came out before the company was even legal to sell motorcycles in every state. There's another story buried in that garage. Click the next video on your screen right now before it disappears. Another story is waiting for you.